And so I want to start with our land acknowledgement statement. MIT acknowledges Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we sit is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce Belinda Tato. Belinda is an architect, landscape architect, urban designer, and educator. She's the co-founder and co-director of Ecosistema Urbano, a design and consulting company that operates across the fields of urbanism, architecture, engineering, and sociology, with offices in Madrid and Miami. Since 2010, Belinda has been faculty at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design, where she's an associate professor of practice in landscape architecture. Ecosistema Urbano defined their approach as urban social design, the design of urban spaces with a social agenda to empower local communities. This philosophy aims to involve citizens in the creative and transformative processes of designing their own urban environments. The projects of Ecosistema Urbano aim to create spaces that are tailored to local climatic conditions, enabling social interaction in public spaces all year round while maintaining both comfortable and resource efficient. Ecosistema Urbano has received numerous recognitions and exhibitions at museums, galleries, and institutions internationally. Some of their best known projects, including the Eco Boulevard in Ecopolis Plaza in Spain, the Energy Carousel in the Netherlands, and the Air Tree in China, are materially and technologically innovative, iconic, whimsical, and invite curiosity. Their practice is uniquely known, however, for both the quality and inventiveness of its built work and their commitment to participation and civic debate in the design process. The work of Ecosistema Urbano embraces the complexity of the forces that shape the public realm, and their process is deeply collaborative, inviting multiple forms of authorship and many voices, showing how a design project can be a platform for communities to engage in civic debate. I think you'll see this commitment to city design as an ongoing and collaborative creative process in the talk today. Belinda is now going to share her work for the next 45 minutes or so, followed by an open question and answer session. You are welcome to post any comments or questions in the chat at any time, and Belinda will respond at the end. So please join me now in extending a warm welcome from MIT to Belinda Tato.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Marie, for the introduction, and thank you so much overall for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be back at MIT, and I see some familiar faces. So, well, I'm going to be sharing a screen. Okay, sorry, 1 second. I just want to make sure that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so my name is Belinda Tato, and I studied the practice Ecosistema Urbano 20 years ago. Ecosistema Urbano stands for urban ecosystem. So I had the pleasure and the opportunity to work in many different places around the world for the last 20 years, which kind of exposed me to different cultures, different environments, different conditions, and different understandings also of public space. So I would like to start with this statement. So I like to think, and I want to kind of, share this message with you, because you're going to be designing whatever, like, planning, landscape, urban design, architecture. But I like to think that we're kind of, we're stakeholders that can have a terrible impact in the built environment. So design transforms reality. Design can change mindsets, design can shape behaviors, design can impact people's lives, and design can contribute to creating equity. Therefore, design can change the future and the lives of people, and design is political. So I like to say that because, we're living in a moment in which equity is being kind of, is tricky. So I like to think that we're kind of people who can have a great impact in the environment. So these are the three main pillars in which I have been working. So the first one is the environmental. So how can we design environments which provide climatic comfort all through the year? How can we enhance urban ecosystems, and how can we bring resiliency to cities? Regarding social, how can we make our design to become educational or pedagogical? How can we engage with the local communities, and how can we bring equity through our work? And technology, how can we embed interaction in the designs and in the public space that were kind of implemented? How can we bring innovation, and how can we design open processes in which we do not have full control of the final ending, but that's the exciting part, because people are going to be kind of transforming them themselves. So I'm going to be presenting some examples that are illustrating these concepts. So the first one is environmental. So this is a project that we implemented in the outskirts of Madrid. It's a very suburban area, and as you can see, it's mainly kind of single homes or row houses, but they all have their own kind of, let's say, public space, and the public space is not exciting at all. So the competition was calling for the creation of a new kindergarten, and it was very important for us not only to design and deliver a good quality, energy efficient building as an architectural piece, but also to provide some kind of publicness or public space linked to it. Because particularly in these communities in which life is very suburban, the role of schools is very important in terms of creating social fabric and the opportunities for people to interact. Not only that, also because of the location, which is Madrid, and it's a very kind of tricky future regarding water and the water scarcity. It was very important to us to deliver a solution that could recycle all the waste waters from the building. So it was not only about the rainwater, which of course can be kind of stored, purified, and reutilized, but also the wastewaters from the building. So it was in the very initial idea to create this kind of lagoon, and we partnered up with a company who works with macrophyte plants. So these macrophyte plants can again clean the wastewater, and so that we have that water available for reuse. So again, it was not only important to deal with the water itself, like, to kind of recycle it, but also to, to embed that message and to make, again, space educational. So it's not only the school community who is aware of this recycling water, but it's also kind of the larger community who has been kind of aware about the water scarcity and everything else. So this is how the plants are kind of floating. So the company designed these elements which are floating in the water, and the plants and the roots are kind of hanging in the floating in the water. And this is the tank. This is during the construction period. So you can see here the tank where the water will be kind of stored, and then it's stored underground, and then it can be reutilized for the irrigation of the park. So one of the challenges that we had is that unless we could provide this recycled water, we should not be introducing green lawns, because there's a scarcity in water. It doesn't make sense to be using potable water for that. So the site, I mean, there's not that much information or, about the context here, but the site is a very rough environment. It is an industrial site. It is surrounded by industrial warehouses. There is a lot of trucks driving by. Therefore, there is noise and pollution. And the whole idea of the intervention was to create this kind of buffer public space. So we were creating these topographies to create this kind of protection for the kids. It is kids between 0 and 3 years old. And again, the idea was to create this kind of public space so that actually parents would be not kind of just dropping the kids from the car, but actually they have to enter into the public space to use the building. So these are some images from the building when it was finalized. One of the things that was also very important, of course, it was in terms of the architectural resolution, is a Class A energy efficient building. And we are working with these textiles awnings that can be operated in such a way that during the winter, we're capturing as much sunlight as possible to reduce the energy bill, but in the summertime they are protecting the facade and making it efficient. So the space has become kind of a hotspot, or kind of a popular space even in the weekends, and kids and teenagers are hanging out here. And moreover, I would like to say that it has become a kind of a landmark or a beacon in the city of Rivas, and people come in and they're very proud of the space. So I would like to say that again, we are changing people's lives, because this was an industrial site. It is a kindergarten, but it's not only a kindergarten, it's much more than that. It's a public space, it's a gathering space. So here you can see the macrophytes when they have been, they're kind of more grown, and it had to be fenced in the end, which was not originally planned, but that is because because the deposit is like, I don't know, like 20 feet deep. So it made all the sense. So again, the building has been awarded and has received a number of recognitions, but the most important is that it has kind of had an impact in people's minds and people who live there. So this is another project, and the scope here was different. It was a boulevard which is 500 meters long and 50 meters wide, and the starting point is a kind of a planning which is completely new. It's a new suburbs in Madrid, but the planning has very little to do with the Mediterranean way of life in which we occupy actively public space. So the original plan, again, was not considering any kind of factor about human scale. It was very much about mobility, about cars moving easily throughout the whole neighborhood, and concentrating all the economic and commercial activity in one spot. So there was no incentive to come into the street to walk, and there is really nothing. So this is, again, the original street. As you can see, it's not that exciting. The trees in the sidewalks are not that exciting, and it will take a number of years to get a canopy that is kind of reasonable. But also the configuration of the street didn't make any sense. So here you have the sidewalk, the parking lane, two driving lanes, a parking lane, another kind of, let's say, island in the middle, and then the same symmetrical scheme on the other side. So as you can see, the experience of walking through here is not that exciting. And again, it's very little connected to the, to the culture that we have locally, which is very much about intensively using public space. So one of the main actions, together with these more iconic interventions, was to plant more trees. So we multiplied by 3 the number of original trees by sacrificing some of the parking lanes. So the idea was like, again, we were looking at this street in the context of the whole neighborhood, and it didn't make sense to have such huge space dedicated and devoted to cars. So we were creating a more kind of a pedestrian-friendly street. The other main idea was to create this climatic comfortable solution. So the whole point was about summer, because summer is very, very tough in Madrid. It's very dry and temperatures are very high. So the idea was like, how can we, by using low tech and low means and kind of off-the-shelf elements that are already in the industry of greenhouses, how can we lower down the temperature by introducing water atomizers? So we created these elements that are 3 different ones, and the elements are always the same. They're just assembled differently. And the idea was to create this kind of, again, gathering space, public space, introducing vegetation, introducing the misting. So here you can see the water a lot, because this picture was taken in the winter time when they were testing the systems after the construction was finished. But actually, if it is operating, water would be almost invisible or invisible completely, because in the summer, again, the air is very, very dry and the water kind of disappears. So again, the most exciting part for us is to see that actually a space or a street that was devoted completely to cars and had nothing to, to be around for, had become a very popular space for different kind of events. It's been exciting to see that there's been concerts, there's been plays, there's been just, I don't know, community meetings and all sort of activities. This is a second iteration of the project. So we were invited by the city of Madrid to create a pavilion in the context of the Shanghai Expo 2010. And the original idea was the same, was to kind of show how can we climatically design spaces for comfort. And it was shocking to see that actually in the expo, although the motto was better cities, better lives, actually the master plan of the expo was very uncomfortable to be outside for. So somehow nobody had taken into account how humid and how hot the summer is in Shanghai. So it was very, very uncomfortable to be, for instance, queuing to enter into the pavilions. So our space was about creating this kind of climatically comfortable area for people to wait, for people to hang out, for people to have lunch before entering the Madrid pavilion. And we were, again, working with low tech and systems that are already in place. And we were monitoring the climatic conditionings, and this interface was kind of reacting to it real time. And this is a totally different context, but also thinking about how can we bring more activity? How can we make public space more appealing for people? And one of the points is, again, climatic comfort. So this is the city of West Palm Beach. The city of West Palm Beach has is interesting because it doesn't have a beach, and the relationship with the water is very tough. Like you can see here, the waterfront, and it's not very exciting. There is this kind of harsh limit, concrete limit between the water and the natural systems and the city. And it's also very exposed to hurricanes and to all these kind of climatic hazard elements. So our proposal was, again, how can we reactivate this public space by improving the climatic comfort? And as an outsider, and I come from a country and from an environment and a culture in which we, again, occupy a lot and use a lot the public space, even in the summer, okay? So here it was very shocking for me as an outsider to see that there is this huge culture around air conditioning. And actually during the summer is the low season because it's very, very hot and very, very humid. It's very comfortable to be outside. But actually for the rest of the year, it's extremely beautiful. Like I would say that 10 months out of 12 is pretty good to be outside. So, but still public space is not that exciting. There's not that many activities. There's not that many programs. So our proposal was about creating this kind of canopies, and that would create a kind of a different condition, different relationship between the city and the lagoon. And it was about producing this catalog of low-tech solutions that would enable to create different programs and to host different programs, okay? So these are, again, the ground level, the canopy, the bioclimatic devices that would kind of be used for different moments during the year. And the experience of, for instance, embedding a swimming pool as a feature in public space. Of course, we were focusing on the climatic comfort and the public space redevelopment, but there was a very underlying condition that it was about creating equity, because the downtown of the city is, of course, very beautiful, and it's kind of pristine, and it's got a lot of amenities, but there is a lot of neighborhoods which are completely under equipped, and they don't have that kind of easy accessibility to the city center. So here we have this kind of buffer interface between the city and the water, and not only planning for today's, but also planning for the future, like, considering sea level rise and solutions that could be reacting and responding to this sea level rise. So we were doing this, again, catalog of different conditions for different areas of the waterfront and the city. And another part of this competition was to redo or upgrade an existing garage building. And again, the idea was to introduce a number of programs which would enable different kind of people to come in and use the city center, but also with a bioclimatic kind of approach. So as you can see in the section, the red line is a kind of a promenade or a street that goes all the way from the ground level through this ramp to the rooftop. So again, how can we bring this publicness into a hybrid program, into a hybrid building that would allocate a number of different programs? So here are some concepts that have to do with, again, with the bioclimatic performance, with the programs. So the idea was to have this kind of natural courtyard, which again, we're kind of filtrating the air and lowering down the temperature, and a number of different systems for both the day and the night. And this is an image of the rooftop. And this was this kind of buffer space between the existing building and the new addition. So with food trucks and everything. So how can we bring this kind of public space to this elevated platform? And always with this bioclimatic, let's say, filter or buffer, so that there is kind of two facades that operate, together to lower down the temperature. And the idea was to not provide air conditioning to every system. So there was these different degrees of climatic performance according to the different programs that will be operating in the building. And the idea was also to have a day and night building that would operate for different programs, and trying to understand how the circulations would be compatible for these different users and programs. And this is a small project that is to be built in the next few months. And it is an installation in front of a cultural institution in Spain. And again, it has this environmental component, but also educational component. And it is about recreating the Mediterranean forest, and try to make it a kind of again, landmark and a point of entrance into the institution, cultural institution. So regarding the second aspect, which is the technology, so we have been exploring over these last few years ways of engaging with the community and getting people engaged with their public space and with others through the use of technology. So we are kind of, and I will be showing a project in Malaga that we are currently implementing. Is under construction right now. So it is about how can we transform public space into a space that can be customized for the different uses and different programs. So we've been exploring this idea of how could we have a classroom operating in the public space. This has not emerged because of the COVID, which is kind of interesting because actually it's very relevant. This project was designed before the COVID situation, but actually again plays with this idea that in certain context, the climatic conditions allow you to have a more intense use of public space. And how can we explore different possibilities of being outside and interacting with others and making the most of it. So these are kind of portions from this Malaga project. The Malaga project is a project for the university campus, and it is a 2-kilometer boulevard. And again, the starting point was like, can we bring some of the academic activity that usually takes place indoors and that not kind of blend with the city or with the citizens at all? Can we bring it outside? Can we create a more exciting experience, both for the students, but also for the citizens? And how can we enhance this experience? By the introduction of, again, features that can be customized for the day, for the night, for the lighting conditions, for the climatic conditions, and so on and so forth, for projections and so on. This is a small project that we designed for the city of Dordrecht in the Netherlands. So the departure point was to create a playful object, a kind of a playground for kids. So we like to think of sustainability as something positive, something that we can embed into the projects, and something that should be playful. Okay, and not only that, but also we should empower and educate the younger generations, because they're the ones who are kind of taking over and leading the world in a few more years. So the project is playing with the idea of producing energy with the rotation of the carousel during the day, so that energy can be utilized for the lighting during the night. So again, the more the kids play, the more energy is produced and the lighting will be better. So so this was implemented, and it was very interesting and very challenging, because to overcome or to comply with all the European codes regarding playgrounds, it was very tough, but we managed. And then in the end, we saw that kids were using it in very, very crazy ways that were not expected. And again, this is a small project that we conceived for the city of Madrid, again, as a beacon in which people could interact and relate to each other, and kind of sharing content through this kind of a landmark element. And this is the project, and then the one on the right is the Malaga project that we will see in more detail later. So it's about using, I would like to say that, of course, we are not software developers. We have cooperated with software developers, but the most interesting part is to think of how can we take advantage of today's technologies that are already in market, that they're already kind of accessible, to introduce and to kind of, let's say, hack the public space and use it in different ways. So this is a platform that we designed a few years ago, and it is about participation. So the question was like, how can we, bridge the gap between city officials or planners and citizens? So we created this platform in which, in this particular case, we were using the red for the problems and the blue for the opportunities. And it's a very intuitive platform that people can use to map in a georeference map their ideas, their problems, their concerns around certain topics. So we have used this tool in different places around the world, and it's been interesting because at some point we just, it is an open source tool that now anyone can download it and customize it for their own purposes. And it gives you this kind of very simple, screens about what are the most popular words, both in problems and opportunities, but also you can have some other kind of visualizations about where are the most problematic areas of the city, or what are the most opportunistic areas of the city. The third category that I would like to talk about is the social, that I have kind of, even if it is the third category, is kind of, across every other, because I've been talking about the social already a lot. So we've been doing a lot of participatory projects and processes around the world, again, in different contexts, in different conditions, for different scopes, within different frameworks, because in some occasions it is part of our planning process, or a part or a portion of our design process. But in other occasions, we were just kind of supporting the planners or the planning team or the city. So we have different experiences. Some of them are very, I was going to say successful, or I mean, there's success in all of them. There is also pain and a little bit of suffering in all of them. So this is in Hamar. The city of Hamar is a city in the north of Oslo in Norway. So I'm going to be playing a video. So we entered a competition in which they were calling for an artistic intervention in the main public space of the city. Our approach was having a single mind or a single team designing an art intervention. Why don't we design a process that is collective, that is engaging the local community, and think about the future not only of the square, but also kind of engaging into a larger conversation. So there was the competition had different stages, and this was the final stage in which we delivered this video together with a booklet. So we're gonna watch it. Okay, so as I was saying, they were calling for this competition, and our first initial kind of motto was, instead of one square, it's 1,000 square. Why don't you, instead of again using that huge budget that you have into doing something final and just conceived by a single mind, why don't you create a process in which you can start testing out different ideas, different solutions, and engage the community along with the process. So we won the competition, and that started a negotiation process with the board of the city, but we managed. And so the project was called it was Dream Hammer. And the idea was to, again, design different sorts of activities. So this is the final diagram that, kind of collapses them all. So there was these urban actions. How can we not only talk about the future of the square, but how can we show experiences? How can we pilot them? How can we test them out? How can we mock them up? Like, how can we do something that actually is not just about talking and talking, but just providing experiences? The physical lab was a space that was in front of the square that we had the fortune to be able to rent. So we were literally working in front of the square that we were designing. So it was a very exciting moment, because we were there like for 5 months, and we were living there and we were working there, and we were creating this kind of interface between the city and us as designers, or between the citizens. So all the activities took place in the physical lab. Then the digital lab, there was a number of online activities that were workshops and ways of sharing the progress, and we took a number of interviews. And so there was this idea of having a kind of a continuous thread that was open and accessible to everyone, so that they could know how the city was being, redone. The academic network, we create this partnership with different academic institutions from all around Europe, and some students and thesis students and diploma students, they were taking this as their brief. So there was also a number of, let's say, academic contributions to the project. And then the urban design, of course, we did deliver an urban design, first a preliminary one, and then another one once we wrapped up the participation. So this is the physical lab in which we were working for 5 months. And this is as you can see, here is the square, and here is the physical lab. So for the urban actions, we invited, for instance, the art collective Boa Mistura, who are these urban artists from Madrid, and they managed to transform the existing parking lot just in 2 days into this kind of beautiful Norwegian pattern. They really managed to disguise actually the parking lines. So it was interesting to see how a place which had been operating as a parking lot for the last 50 or 60 years was quickly transformed into something else. And that triggered different conversations in a different kind of environment. So we organized this open lunch, what we called Cream Hammer, that people would come over and chat about the future of the space. Regarding the academic, not only we engaged the university, but also there was more than 1,400 kids locally working for the square. They were kind of curated by their art teachers. So it was interesting because everybody was kind of aware of this transformation. And it was also a way of, let's say, engaging their parents, because people are usually very busy. We're all overwhelmed with work and communication information. So these kids were kind of bringing this transformation and this conversation into their homes. So that was one project, but we have done many different things in different environments, in places in which public space has different meanings and different nuances. This is in Tegucigalpa in Honduras. And not only we did a number of workshops with 100 students, but also the very last action was to do this kind of mural out of 2,200 posts. So we sent the students into the street to ask for ideas from the citizens, and it was interesting because it was a very, very quick action, and we kind of collected all these inputs and made them part of the report, and so on and so forth. So in this occasion, like in the previous one in Norway, we were in charge of the design. We were designing, and we were doing the participatory process in parallel. So we incorporated all of that. In other occasions, we're not in charge of the design, unfortunately. So somehow we kind of do this process, and we just collect it and kind of pass it on to the people or team who are in charge. So these different interfaces, like again, we have designed a number of pieces for kids, for engaging kids into these conversations. For instance, this is Asunción in Paraguay. And we realized that actually kids who have been born in Asunción, who have lived there their whole lives, they were completely disengaged with the city center, with the historical center, which has been deprived for a number of years. So for instance, we did this kind of cartoonish version of the most relevant buildings in the city, and they had to create their own story, for which they had to go to the city historical center during the weekends with their parents. So it's like, how can you engage them to talk about the future of their city in a different way, in a playful way? So different activities. This is also a workshop with students also from Asunción, and they realized that the different mayors over the last 20 years had been promising to do these bike lanes, but at some point during the workshop they realized they could do it themselves. So they got into action, and they painted more than 10 kilometers in one night. So it was interesting because not only we are working with the local people, but somehow it's sparking conversations and triggering processes that had not been happening before. So it was exciting for them to actually see their actions in the newspaper as an anonymous action the following day, but they realized that they were in charge. They could kind of lead this conversation. They didn't need us anymore, or the city or the mayor. So again, it's about empowering communities in completely different ways. So in this particular case, we had been hired by the city. So we are working for the city, but actually the students were kind of, reacting to it in a very creative and positive way. So also in the framework of this master plan for the historical center of Asunción, together with the master plan and more kind of robust document, we deliver, let's say, like 55 pilot projects. And the idea was to give a catalog of possibilities to the city. So there were projects that were SMLXL, like, from projects from, from $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, all the way to 3 or 5 or 20 million. So the idea was like, this should never be an excuse for the city to not get into action. There's so many things that have to be done. So, one of these pilot projects was about transforming these party walls into canvases and inviting artists from the country or from around to produce this a completely art piece throughout the city. So this happened, they did this, and it was a beautiful festival that they organized for only a few days, and there were artists invited from all Latin America. So just with few resources, a whole kind of transformation could happen. And not only that, but also it was about creating a completely, again, new mindset about the city center and getting people to walk the city in a completely different way with the new lenses about these art interventions. So again, we have designed different things, different pieces for different environments. This is in Exuma, which is a number of islands in the Bahamas. This was a collaboration with the GSD and also with the government of the Bahamas. We were not in charge of the planning. There was a planning process in parallel, and they invite us to do some sort of participatory process with the community. So it was kind of sensitive because, of course, we were there only for, I don't know, for a week. But it was a beautiful experience. So we also work with these two colors, the red for the problems, the blue for the opportunities. And it's kind of tricky because when you come to a place, you ask people's time and dedication, and they're very generous to be part of it. You have to find a way to give something in return. So again, I'm showing this because this is a very, very little thing that we did, and it was about creating this kind of activity. So we went to every elementary school and to the high school, and the kids were kind of dreaming about what were their dreams for the city in the future and what were the problems that they were more concerned about. So we collected all these kind of petals. So each of these pages becomes a petal in the flower. And then we created this kind of garden in which you could read the ideas of the people. So how can you do something that, even if it is simple, can bring back to the community some of the knowledge and some of the time that they have put into it? Sorry, I'm gonna be playing two videos, and one is about is the Malaga project, so that we can engage into the conversation, and then the next one is about the West Palm Beach project. Okay.
Imagine an open university that integrates into urban life. Interactive public spaces that promote conversations between disciplines. Technologies and digital interfaces that boost knowledge sharing. In a natural, bioclimatically conditioned environment. Creating connected spaces that enhance exchange between students, teachers, and visitors. The main boulevard at the Universidad de Málaga connects existing facilities and opens up the campus to the public, creating a pedestrian walkway activated by hubs or public squares with learning and leisure spaces, incorporating technology to create an interactive urban environment connected to the digital world, an ecological corridor that efficiently manages resources, creating diverse natural landscapes. Pedestrian walkways protected by natural buffers become the perfect setting for meeting up, resting, and relaxing. Through a digital application, users can interact with the surrounding environment and access an augmented reality with academic and cultural content. The Climatic and Digital Hub integrates collaborative learning spaces, allows the interactive modification of environmental conditions, and generates all of the park's energy. The Hub's canopy hosts technological systems that connect users to the physical space and the digital environment, Along the boulevard, open classrooms are equipped to extend the university experience to public spaces. An extensive network of sensors generate open data that enables climatic research and allows real-time identification of the most comfortable zones of the boulevard. The tranquil Olive Grove's open library encourages reading and resting while promoting and protecting biodiversity. A connected, open, interactive, and green campus. An intelligent natural space with positive energy balance and bioclimatic comfort. A positive space where collaboration, creativity, and learning define the urban scene.
Okay, I'm gonna play them the video out West Palm Beach. Nope.
Can we dream about urban atmospheres that connect us to nature? Can we imagine merging aquatic activities in urban life? Can we combine natural elements and technologies to provide climatic comfort year-round? Can we create a flexible building that promotes entrepreneurship, citizen engagement, and digital interaction? Open Shore creates the framework to experience an urban wetland landscape, enjoy the city while swimming, discover a rainbow on a sunny day, connect with others and get inspired. Open Shore proposal for West Palm Beach is based on the identification of opportunities, the definition of actions and strategies, and the achievement of key improvements towards a vision of a lively urban environment. Open Shore addresses West Palm Beach holistically, considering urban, cultural, social, economic, and environmental aspects. In order to connect the urban vision with a coherent design, we have to look into the different places and programs to carefully identify their potential. The new waterfront is an extraordinary opportunity to reconnect the city to the water, making good use of West Palm Beach's spectacular location. The Great Lawn, already a central piece in the city's urban life, will become the urban living room of West Palm Beach. The Meyer Amphitheater will be the ultimate space for great urban events and all kinds of cultural activities. The alleyways will undergo a rapid activation process, ranging from temporary interventions to the development of permanent structures to host new programs. The former Banyan Garage is reimagined as a new focal point for activities, attracting business and talent to create knowledge, cultivate culture, and foster innovation. Open Shore provides a set of tools to reimagine these places and positively shape the urban transformation of the downtown.
Okay, I would just like to finish saying that communication is very important, as you could see throughout the presentation. Like, if we're kind of aiming to engage with a larger population and not just our peers, we need to create documents that are understood, that are exciting, and that they're appealing for the general public. So we're always kind of exploring how can we present ideas in a more, again, appealing way and clear way. So yeah, these are just some examples, but we work a lot with video, and also video challenges us to make short stories, which is kind of difficult because sometimes we talk a lot and our kind of projects are, very complex and they have very branches and all of that. But it's always been a kind of an interesting kind of exercise to synthesize and try to, to compress ideas into one single video. So yeah, so that's it for now. So I leave it here.
Thank you so much, Belinda. That was a really fantastic presentation. I'd like to open it up now to any questions, comments, discussion from all of the audience that's here right now. So please feel free, if you want to put something in the chat, you can do that. Otherwise, just raise your hand or unmute and ask away. Gabriella, would you like to share your question, or would you like me to?
I can share. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really inspiring. So my question is, what parameters does Ecosistema Urbano use to design public and green spaces to ensure that over time it becomes an equitable and just space instead of a gentrifier?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, we usually intervene. I mean, I always say there's a photographer who is a friend of ours, and every time that we invite him, to accompany us through a process, he's always saying, you always bring me to very ugly spaces, if I can say. So it's like, yeah, because the beautiful ones are already kind of working. We never got to, work in very functional and beautiful and well-performing kind of spaces. So we're kind of intervening in places that are, in many cases, deprived. They're kind of deteriorated, and they really require this investment. So the idea is, how can you create let's say a partnership with the community, so that actually, as you are saying, green gentrification is also kind of a challenge. So how can you kind of, let's say, first fix the population that is already there? How can you guarantee that these people will be able to stay after the intervention? And how can you also create some equity or some interventions that bring some other, let's say middle class or low income class or whatever you need in this particular environment, so that actually you are not kind of expelling these people from out of space. So we have different experience, because for instance, we have worked in the city of Cuenca in Ecuador, which is a historical center, United Nations Heritage, World List, blah, blah, blah. But actually one of the problems is that, they're preserving so much that actually people cannot afford to live there anymore. There is a lot of people, a lot of buildings who are kind of very deteriorated, and it's so difficult, and it requires so many resources to invest, that is only kind of, huge companies who are buying this building and transforming them. So it's about creating a new code. It's like, how can you, make the city aware that actually the most important for a city to be liveful is to be full of people, and hopefully, balance people and diverse people. So it's not just tourist people, or for instance, I'm also working in Valparaiso in Chile, and it's also the same. One of the problems that the city center has is actually because all these Airbnb and these kind of platforms, it has completely expelled the locals. So, when we were giving the recommendations, it's like, if you want to take, ownership of the city, if you want the city to actually remain as a city and not just a kind of a park, like thematic park, you really have to create the conditions, and that means the code, the framework, the laws, the regulations, to enable people to stay in their place. So there are ways of doing so. You can fine or you can incentivize. For instance, there is a lot of developers who are really waiting for the perfect moment to invest. So you cannot have the buildings kind of completely as a, almost as a hazard for the city, because they're kind of falling apart. So you have to find a way to get these people kind of moving. So you are either doing something, and then if you're doing it, maybe a certain percentage should be devoted to this kind of income, or but not doing nothing is just out of the question. So what I'm saying is, like, it's kind of multi-layered. There is no one way to go. You have to find different or develop different kind of actions to enable or to guarantee that actually the neighborhood is going to remain diverse and accessible.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sarah, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks so much for your talk. It was so wonderful to see all your projects, really inspiring. And I was thinking about, working with communities in the way that you do is very different than a lot of architects or urban designers. And so perhaps what are some of the biggest challenges you had in working this way, and maybe how did it change the way that you work in the future on future projects?
So you mean that if some of the experiences that I have is kind of reshaping the way in which we are going to be working in the future?
Yeah, like, you have an idea for how something is going to work out with the community. You think it's going to work out great. Yeah. It actually caused a lot of challenges, and then maybe changed the way that you worked in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a kind of there is room for innovation. I mean, I don't think we're kind of done with participation. Like this is the way to go. Not at all. I think we're living in kind of a technology immersion that enables us to participate in different ways. And we are kind of I didn't bring it up today, but we are kind of exploring new, let's say, interfaces. How can we get people's inputs about something that is ongoing in a creative and playful and innovative way? Because community meetings could be very either neutral, boring, or extremely negative. Like people have their agendas, they feel fearful because of their rights or because of their future or whatever. So what I am saying is we have to make a shift in a way that how can we get people excited, not only worried about the future, but also excited about the opportunities that this is bringing? And how can you make it along the process? So it's not just that you are planning and then you share and then you plan again. And so how can you create the platform or the framework to get this process on, which is ongoing, in a more transparent way, and maybe show different scenarios? Because there is also, we were working in France a few years ago, and they had a very clear idea of how participation should be connected to education in a way in which they were saying, okay, if you want to come to the workshop and to the meeting and have an opinion, you first have to come to this previous meeting in which you are to be, let's say, not educated, but you need to know the insights. You need to know how, what is the potential of this, or how important it is, or how feasible it is technically, economically, according to the code or the law or whatever. So it's not just about having an opinion in a kind of a very superficial way. You have to have the knowledge to be able to have a meaningful opinion. So the question is, how can you run these scenarios in a way that they're not extremely superficial, like, I like this or I like that, or it should be here, it should be like, everything has a lot of consequences. How can you show that in a playful and, let's say, also simple way? Because, people don't have that much time to get through huge documents. So I think there is a potential to kind of redesign the interfaces in which we share information, in which we make these scenarios visible and more understandable and more exciting.
Allison, would you like to ask?
Sure. Thank you for your talk. The projects are really inspirational and they're super interesting. I'm curious about projects like Dream Hamar and sort of similar kind of less prescriptive design projects such as that. So in my experience, these types of projects that focus more on the process, they tend to sort of towards the end or after that process is done, require a significant amount of maintenance, of management, of funding that takes perhaps a more hands-on approach. And I think so from, let's say I'm a local municipality and I have a certain budget. If I allocate all of that budget to the process, I'm curious generally of what happens after that process. What does that look like? What are some of the fears of municipalities that might allocate more of their budget to process, and then what happens after, because less prescriptive places may require an increase in management and maintenance?
Okay. First, a clarification. I didn't show the whole process of Dreamhammer, and that means that I was showing a little bit of the participatory process, but we actually finalized and designed a square that was partially built. It was fully kind of implemented as we conceived it, but it was built. So what I would like to say is that the process was just kind of before the real project happened, okay? The second thing that I would like to say is, like, after the experience of Dreamhammer, I would like to say that actually one of the main outcomes of the process was not just the design itself, it was also about the community that was created around this participation and around this huge amount of meetings and activities and all of that, which surprisingly enough, even if this was a small community, even if I was an outsider, I didn't, I had no ties to Norway, I don't speak Norwegian, etc., I came in, we created this kind of hub space for ideas, blah, blah, blah. And this actually kind of triggered a number of conversations and relationships between the locals that had not happened before. Because living is a little bit rural, like everybody has their backyard, their little garden, their little forest, homeless even. So they don't have the necessity to come into the public space, or at least it doesn't happen that naturally that often, okay? So what I would like to say is that, again, not only we delivered a final design, there was a number of things that actually started to happen because of the project. For instance, the city realized that actually the protocols to use the public space at that point were very were too long or a little bit unclear. So they created a new protocol for the reactivation or for the utilization of the public space for doing activities. And one of the persons who were very active during this process, he was an spontaneous volunteer, like, I want to, I'm excited about the project. He was a school teacher, so he was very much into kids, into playgrounds, into activities in the outer space for the kids. So he ended up being hired by the city as a mediator for the organization of activities in the public space. So what I'm saying is there was a number of things that go beyond our expectations that were very exciting. In my very last days there, because again, I was living and working there for a few months, then all of a sudden one guy came into the physical, space that we had there, and the square is facing, there is a kind of a very clear axis towards the church. So he was the priest of the church. And then he said, you know what, I've been watching you these months. This has been exciting. I would like to do a mass outdoors. And I thought that was so exciting. It's like, wow, it's like it took us a while, but it was very nice because, again, people were quiet, but of course everybody knew what was happening. So what I am saying is, like, there was a number of things happening after we left, and that's what kind of inspires me. Is like, we're consultants, we work everywhere, but we cannot live everywhere, and it's not our babies, it has to be their babies. The other thing that happened during some of the processes and meetings, somebody came up with the idea, like, what would happen, construction is very expensive, it takes a lot of resources, not only in Norway, but here in the States or in many other places. So, there was this kind of crazy group who was saying, okay, what if instead of transforming the whole square, which is going to be like $30 million, what if that money was put just into programming the square for the next 30 years or for the next 20 years? You will have 1 million per year. So that is a lot of money, right? So I thought that idea was exciting. I thought, it didn't happen, but I thought it was extremely exciting, because one of the things that was lacking in the square was activity. So, and the project was not only about kind of rethinking the future of the square, it was about the whole city center, which was struggling and competing with all the shopping malls that were happening all over the city, and that are very comfortable both in the summer because they're cool, and in the winter when it is very, very minus whatever, and it's very, very cold to be outside. So people come to the shopping malls much more than to the city center. So I didn't show the final design, which I could have included, but our proposal that came from all these conversations and inputs was to create this water feature in the summer, but actually was a skating rink in the winter. So the idea was, how can we again embed activity? The square cannot be just a place to look, a contemplative, beautiful landscape. There has to be something going on. Otherwise, people will just not come anymore. So again, yeah, I think this is a very important point that you're bringing up. The other thing that I would like to mention is that in some occasions, we were hired by let's say the local government or the national government or whoever, okay? So we start a process, and there is a little bit of resistance, okay? Because we are outsiders, we are foreigners, we don't know the city enough. So in the city of Encarnacion in Paraguay, we won a competition to do the whole planning for the city, okay? So we opened up an office there, somebody from Madrid came there, we hired a little team there. So again, there was a lot of resistance. We were very resilient. We were working, doing a number of activities, trying to make the process as transparent, as open, as informative as possible. So at some point there was a change in the mayor office, like, the mayor stepped down or whatever, he was kicked out or whatever. So there was a change, okay? So it was interesting because the community's reaction was completely unpredictable. Like, at some point at the beginning, they were not supporting us. At that point, we had gained their trust. So they trusted us more than the mayor. So it was interesting because at some point, the new government that took the office, they were hesitating about whether to implement and, push forward the project or not. And people were kind of claiming it, from their side. So it was interesting because, again, it was a kind of a top-down action. Somebody had hired us, but then in the end, it was a kind of a bottom-up kind of claim, like they wanted us to be involved. So we have experienced a lot of different conditions. Of course, every project is different. It is every city and every scope, but there is always, there was always a very strong, let's say, human or social factor that is connected to the projects. So it's nothing. It's never neutral, let's say.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Alan Berger has a question. Alan, do you want to share that?
Sure. Hey, Belinda, good to see you. And hi to everybody else. You and Maria have something in common, which is you both enjoy these participatory processes, which really could grind most of us down to a stump. So, but the blending of public art and landscape urbanism really has always come through very strong in your work, and it's got a long trajectory. And I'm curious to know, because you don't really, I mean, you're not using technology in a kind of deterministic way to make decisions with community members. You're working with them, you're talking with them, you're meeting with them. How is COVID going to impact your work? Number one, in the process, because you like to spend time face to face. And number two, what does that mean for public space in your projects where you have water moving around and lots of people kind of interacting? What is COVID going to do, or how's it impacting your process? Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. I mean, it already impacted our work. I mean, everybody's work. And, we were working a different iteration of the project in Asunción, working for the World Bank over the summer. And we thought everything would be halted because of COVID. And it was actually the opposite. Like we kind of scheduled these kind of regular meetings with a huge kind of table of stakeholders every Wednesday at the same time. So what I am saying is, like, also this situation has exposed us and has shown us that there is other ways to work and cooperate. So, I travel a lot, and, you always kind of think that, physical presence is required to create these bonds and these links, but actually Zoom has kind of breathed some of it. It's not the same, but it has kind of creating a different mindset also, that there is some conversations that can happen also online and don't require, this physical presence. So what I'm saying is, I am sure each of us and all of us are experiencing the different ways of interacting and communicating with this COVID situation. Regarding the COVID situation on public space, we also were in conversations about public space in informal settlements in Argentina, because when we are saying, at the very beginning with the COVID instructions was like, you have to wash your hands 7 times a day, you have to keep the social distance, and you have to not to go to work physically, you can do it from your home. So this is completely impossible in informal settlements, because sometimes they don't have running water, or they have running water for 20 people, like 1 point of running water for 20 people. You cannot be inside your house because actually you cannot keep social distance. And actually sometimes public space is even a little bit more, let's say, safe than your own domestic space. And you cannot stay indoors and work from home, because maybe your work is very much about labor and working with your hands, and you really need to get out. So I think that this is kind of forcing us of thinking of that public space is even more necessary than it was before. So I don't see it as a restraint or a constraint, like, yeah, we're done, we cannot use public space. I feel a little bit more like the opposite, also because I come from Madrid, in which, people don't live in huge homes. It's about small apartments. So the use and the necessity of public space is very, very high. Like we really, I see and I perceive, and I've been living my whole life understanding that public space is somehow an extension of my home. It's an extension of my domestic experience. And in Spain, and again, in a country like Spain, or in the north of Africa, or so many other places, the heat is so high during the day in the summer that actually people kind of really use a lot and expand and use the public space during the night. So there is this kind of, let's say, daily flow that has to do with the climate, but also has to do this kind of social and the need of expansion of using a space. So I don't see COVID as a constraint. I see it more as the opposite. We have to equip public spaces in the best possible way. We have to equip them so that climate change will not affect them, so that they can really be kind of usable and comfortable throughout the whole year, which is not the case in many different places around the world right now. So, and especially I would say in the most vulnerable communities, because the better your house is, probably the least you need to come into the public space. So, the more dense the environment is, the smaller your apartment is, and the less resources that you have, the biggest necessity that you have about having a very well equipped public space. So it's very connected to your income or to your condition.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question, and then if there's others. Belinda, I've heard you in other lectures sort of start out by talking about your training. Both you and your partner are trained as architects, and during the 1990s, when there was a sort of special preoccupation with form and digital technologies as a way of producing novel forms. And then the focus of your work is really about, democratic process and participation, which is something that is in some ways very much at odds with the sort of top-down design processes that were so popular at that time. And so I'm curious to hear more about where your agenda as a practice came from when you launched your firm and the approach to the work. Where did you learn your techniques, and how have those changed over time as you've engaged with communities in different ways, and communities that are not your own communities too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to say that it's not that I learned, it's that I keep on learning. Every project and every city is kind of, pushing us in different ways and challenges us in different ways. Because of course, as I was saying at the beginning, my understanding of even my understanding of participation is different in different contexts. Like we've been working in Kyrgyzstan, which is a completely different environment and culture, and not only language. So what I am saying is it's a whole kind of learning process and continuing learning process, because every project has its characteristics. I would like to say that when I talk about participation, it's not only about talking to the community, what they want. Participation, I would say, at every possible level. So for instance, when we were working in Cuenca, Ecuador, we come to the city, and the city officials say, okay, who do you want to talk to? And I say, I want to talk to everybody, because we're going to be working on public space. And for me, the public space is kind of the crossroads between economic development, culture, safety, parks and gardens and environmental issues. So unless we kind of get to talk to all of these people and get them to talk together, we're not doing a project that is going to be successful afterwards anyway. Or for instance, when I was showing them the macrophyte lagoon that I was showing in the first project, unless you get into a conversation with the people who have to manage and maintain that lagoon in the next 10 years, because you are changing the protocol in which they're operating today. So it's not that a great fine idea that we have, we just put it there and we leave and everything is going to be great. Not at all. I would say that it's actually the opposite. I would say the problem could be that it's almost the opposite. So you have to guarantee that whatever you do makes sense for the community, which is a kind of a communication process. Because of course, when we kind of came up with this idea of recycling the water, there was a huge resistance. They didn't want it. It goes against their principles or their code, or they just feel fearful that something is going to happen to them, or that it's going to be more costly or whatever. So, I mean, there's so many resistances. So you have to do, this kind of, again, it's not community meetings, it's officials meetings, and the very people who are going to be kind of working with the water. So how can you get them engaged into this transformation so that you can guarantee that actually this is taking place, not only now, but also kind of looking into the future, it makes sense. And that is, I would like to say that, again, this participation is not only about the end user, let's say, it's like, how can you start establishing a kind of it's a new mindset, also looking into space in different ways, and also make them feel that they're part of this transformation. Because again, it's not just a great architect or great designer who has a beautiful idea. If they're not part of this conversation, that idea will not flourish and it will be a problem. So it's not only that you want them to feel part of it, that you do, of course, but also they're truly part of it. They're truly part of this to be successful. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions that we want? I think we could take maybe one more before we close out. Allison, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, but since I've asked one, if there's any others, feel free to boot me to second.
I don't see anyone, so go ahead.
I'll just jump in with a quick one. So because we were talking about participation and communication, I'm curious to know, there's been a lot of digital tools, surveys online and online mapping, and kind of these tools that profess to engage more types of people, diverse audiences and so forth. And sometimes I feel like a lot of these kind of end up targeting the same group of people. So people who already work in the industry, students who already are kind of spending their time and energy and focus on this already. And you spoke about producing videos and other kind of like more innovative ways to communicate to the public that might engage a more diverse audience. I'm curious of any other tools, techniques, tips that you've had from your experience.
Okay, in the different projects that we did, we use different things. And again, I'm always learning, so I think I'm a student yet, so that's totally fine. So one of the things is that, you cannot assume that just by, putting a poster or an ad about a workshop, people are gonna show up, and every kind of people from different environments or neighborhood. That doesn't make sense. I mean, that is, participating take resources, and time is a huge resource, especially in certain communities. So you have to feel that you are invited. You have to feel that your time is going to be worth it. You have to have the time. You have to have maybe even the way to get into the meeting place, because maybe you live in a remote neighborhood and you don't have even the resources to go to the place. So you cannot make all that many assumptions. So what I'm saying is, like, when we were doing a planning process, which requires all these different, we were kind of moving. We were kind of a mobile unit. Like, we were coming to the neighborhoods. We were kind of trying to figure out who, what were the spaces in which they would gather naturally. So it's not only about asking them or expecting them to come to you. It's like, how can you come to them? How can you, and maybe I would say it's always a set of tools. It's like, you do the app, great, but not everybody's going to be using the app, obviously. You do the workshops, great, but not everybody's going to show up. So how can you how can you do something for the developers and for the kids and maybe for the creative people or for the teenagers? And how can you start kind of collecting all these inputs and then also at some point maybe sharing in a way that they can learn from each other? So it's not a recipe fits for all. I would say, it's like, again, how can you identify what are the groups that you want to kind of, get attention from and try to develop something in particular. So for instance, in Norway, there was a huge or a numerous group of Somalian immigrants, and they didn't speak Norwegian. They didn't speak, I don't know. It was difficult to get them to come to the workshops. So we knew that they were coming to this, language school to learn Norwegian. So actually we did a workshop with them there. So it's like, again, how can you bridge the different gaps, because it's too many of them, and assume that always it will be imperfect. Okay. And yeah, I was going to say something else, but I don't remember. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Well, I think this was a really amazing lecture. It's kind of touched on so many things in terms of how maybe an architectural scale project can address the deficits in the public space, and thinking about participation processes and everything. So you've given us so much to think about, and I really thank you for your time today. It was really great to have you here at virtual MIT today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for attending, for the questions and everything. I hope we can stay in touch, even if through Zoom or something.
Yeah, thank you all for coming this morning. It was really great.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.